Good morning. It's Wednesday, the 13th of September here in London. This is the Bloomberg Daybreak Europe podcast. I'm Caroline Hepker.
And I'm Tom McKenzie. Coming up today, the UK economy reverses recent gains, shrinking at the quickest pace in 7 months.
BP CEO Bernard Looney quits over failing to fully disclose past relationships with colleagues.
Plus, Apple unveils its latest iPhone and hikes top-end prices everywhere except the UK.
Let's start with a roundup of our top stories.
The UK economy has shrunk at the quickest pace in 7 months as dull weather held back spending and strikes hit the public sector, unwinding the strength of the previous month. GDP fell by 0.5%, 0.5% in July after a 0.5% gain the month before. Our UK correspondent Lizzie Burden says the reversal will give the Bank of England pause for thought ahead of next week's rate decision.
This data suggests that there is a bit more weakness in the economy perhaps than was thought. We're going to get more inflation data on the eve of the decision. That's expected to show that the headline rate actually increases because of contributions from petrol and diesel prices. So you might see another hike yet, but maybe we get to that peak sooner than perhaps thought.
Lizzie Burden also says that the latest estimate may well be revised later this month based on recent changes to the way the data is calculated.
Now, Apple has launched a range of upgraded iPhones. It also raised the price of its top-end handset by almost 10% in the US. But as Bloomberg's chief correspondent Mark Gurman points out, there's one place where prices won't be rising.
The UK is unique today for a very key reason. There was actually no price increase in the UK. In fact, the new iPhones are cheaper in the UK than they were previously, coming down by about £100, which corresponds to about $128 US. So if you're in the UK, you might be getting a better deal than you did last year.
Mark Gurman says that the new iPhone models, which include a USB-C connector, represent the first significant iPhone overhaul since the 5G phones came out 3 years ago. Apple CEO Tim Cook will be hoping that the update will pull the company out of a sales slump and fears of a consumer backlash in China.
Now to another major corporate story. BP's CEO Bernard Looney has resigned over failing to fully disclose past relationships with colleagues. Looney's exit leaves the oil and gas giant looking for a new CEO as the company pushes ahead with a costly transition to low-carbon energy. Bloomberg's managing editor for energy and commodities, Simon Casey, says the decision is part of a wider trend at corporations.
You'll see CEOs, big corporate bosses, failing to be honest with their boards. Fundamentally, that's what this is partly about. It's got a lot tougher in recent years. Boards feel much more empowered to enforce these rules and to hold even the CEO to account.
Simon Casey says that while BP hasn't named a long-term successor, it typically picks its CEOs from among the ranks of its own top executives.
Storms and flooding in eastern Libya are thought to have claimed more than 2,300 lives, with thousands more people missing. A search for survivors is underway after a Mediterranean storm hit the city of Derna, with dams collapsing, triggering flooding. High water levels, but also tumultuous politics, are hindering rescue efforts. Rami El-Shahabi, who is from the World Health Organization in Libya, says it's a disaster zone.
The situation is more disastrous than we expected, and the numbers keep piling up. So those who have not been reported as found are considered very likely to be dead or under the rubbles of those buildings that collapsed after the floods.
Meanwhile, rescue teams have recovered over 2,000 bodies in eastern Libya today. Officials fear that the death toll, though, could exceed 5,000.
OK. Doubleline Capital CEO Jeffrey Gundlach, well, he's fired back at retired Bond king Bill Gross, saying he hopes he feels better about himself. The ongoing feud in the world of finance returned after Gross criticised Gundlach, saying he wasn't anywhere near being crowned a Bond king.
To be a Bond king or queen, you need a kingdom. You need a kingdom. Okay, PIMCO had $2 trillion. Okay, Doubleline's got like $55 billion. That's no kingdom. That's like Latvia or Estonia. Then look at his record for the last 5, 6, 7 years. How does 60th percentile smack of a Bond king? It doesn't.
Poor old Latvia. Gross there in a live recording at Bloomberg's Hot Lots podcast. In response, Gundlach says, quote, "It is sad for somebody that's been out of the business for so long, 10 years, and is still trying to exorcise the demons, but I hope he's doing fine."
This caught my attention, though. The policies around families have come to the fore in the UK, but also specifically around births. This issue is one that is significant for the UK. You know, worries around demographics, not just in the UK, Germany, Italy, Japan also. But David Miles, who's the chief forecaster at the UK's Office for Budget Responsibility, is a well-known economist in the UK. He actually says that lower birth rates are set to help household living standards, that long-term they might not be quite so bad as we think. He's done some new analysis.
Well, he points as well to the fact that if you have an increase in population, you have to match that with the build-out of infrastructure. And the UK has clearly failed to do that. Many other countries have as well. But then he points as a slightly different case, or a case of example of shrinking population, Japan, that has actually managed to continue to increase per capita GDP, even as that population has, of course, famously shrunk, and they've struggled with that declining population. So it's a kind of counterintuitive look. I remember we spoke to Grace Peters, JP Morgan, just a week ago or so, and she said one of the key reasons she was negative on the UK was because of the population constraints, particularly post-Brexit.
Yeah, and that seemed to me more of a migration argument than one of births. Yeah, the other thing that I pull out of what David Miles was saying is that the reason that sort of on a household, on a more individual basis, that it might be helpful for people's finances is simply the cost of having children. You know, the cost of raising kids, of childcare is so astronomical in the UK that actually households might kind of reconsider it on that basis effectively. Look, I think it's a really interesting bit of analysis, you know, demographics being destiny, that old economics catchphrase.
Yeah, really interesting and really important to us when you think about the productivity challenges of many countries as well. And we're going to focus on the UK now.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, speaking of the UK economic picture, so we had the latest monthly GDP figures out this morning. Disappointing. The UK economy shrank at the fastest pace in 7 months in July at 0.5%. It comes, though, after the ONS reviewed UK growth post-pandemic and actually upgraded economic output significantly for Britain. Joining us now to discuss this and much more, I'm delighted to say, is the UK Exchequer Secretary to the Treasury, Gareth Davies. Good morning. Lovely to have you back on Bloomberg Radio.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.
Great. Reaction to the UK GDP figures then. The monthly data was much worse than expected. Rapid Bank of England rate rises are biting, plus the bad weather and strikes. Your view?
So I think, the data out today has been explained by the ONS as being as a result of two one-off factors. One is the wet weather in that particular month. That's hurt retail sales by about 1.2%, which is down, and also construction. So that is one factor. And as you allude to, the other factor is industrial action, particularly in the healthcare sector. And we've seen a drag on growth as a result of health sector output. So I think it's important to, one, identify what has caused today's figures, but two, put it in the context of the overall picture, which is that, the end of Q2 growth was up unexpectedly by some estimates, but also the IMF, as you alluded to as well, has upgraded significantly their growth forecast for the UK. The Bank of England have said that we're going to avoid a recession, and the ONS revised their previous analysis to say that we were one of the fastest growing economies out of the pandemic. So it is important to put this data out today in the context of the overall picture.
Yeah, context is obviously important, and the forecasts are accurate. But Gareth, what is your level of confidence that we are not in the foothills of a recession right now here in the UK?
Well, I remember not so long ago, a lot of the forecasters were saying that we'd be in a recession by now, and that hasn't happened. As I say, I think the IMF, the Bank of England, and the OBR have all upgraded their forecasts for growth. For the Treasury, for the government, what we are doing is, seeking to ensure that we stimulate growth through our active policies. So whether it's workforce participation, as you saw at the budget with the childcare reforms.
Still 2.6 million people who have healthcare issues who have not returned. 2.6 million people, Gareth. And that's linked to the NHS and the failures in the NHS. You have to fix the NHS to get some of those people back. 2.6 million people.
So What I was going to say is we are taking decisive action to increase workforce participation, but also trying to unblock some of the issues for those who want to work to be able to work. So we're piloting various schemes, for example, to help the disabled and those with long-term health issues by providing extra support to them to get them into the workforce, because we recognise that we want to, there's more work to do to get people back into the workforce. We, clearly have post-pandemic a post-pandemic situation in the NHS where we need to clear the backlog of appointments. The industrial action is not helping that, and we've been very clear. The industrial action has caused, I think, nearly 900,000 appointments to be cancelled, and so we are very clear about that. That is not something that we agree with, and is clearly having an impact. But overall, I think the employment record is strong. Unemployment is still lower than most of our international competitors, and payroll employment is still at record highs. So again, context is important.
But that's part of the problem for the UK, isn't it? It's that is fueling inflation. The Bank of England, though, expects Britain to stagnate basically for much of the next 2 years. So maybe, we aren't in recession, but we're certainly bumping along the bottom, and that is the fundamental issue for Britain. It's actually raising long-term economic growth. It's not much to celebrate if the next 2 years are going to be stagnant and living standards are under continued enormous pressure.
Well, the thing that we've got to do is, as I've said many times before, the top priority, the thing we've got to do is cut inflation. We've got to get inflation down, because that acts as a drag on growth, and the Prime Minister, the Chancellor, I have been very clear that is our number one priority. We've got to make sure that what we do in the Treasury, fiscal policy, is aligned with monetary policy, that we support the Independent Bank of England to tame inflation and get it down.
Do you have to start cutting, though? Is the triple lock on UK pensions going? I mean, it looks like William Hague has basically taken the heat from the Prime Minister by calling for the pensions guarantee to be ditched. The IFS that we were speaking to only yesterday saying that it's going to cost an extra £2 billion more than budgeted. £2 billion. That's not insignificant given how little headroom the Treasury has. Is the pensions triple lock just toast?
Well, we're committed to the triple lock. Since we introduced it, I think 200,000 pensioners have been brought out of absolute poverty. About 12.5 million people in this United Kingdom rely on it and use it as a foundation for their retirement. What we want to do is ensure that we provide security and dignity in retirement, while also ensuring that the system that we put in place is fair and sustainable. And we're very clear that we're committed to the triple lock.